Shadows in the attic, the disappearance, Maplewood, a town blanketed by foggy mornings and nestled between dense, silent forests, had always been a place where rumors died quietly. When high school English teacher Emily Galloway went missing on a stormy autumn night, the townspeople whispered about it, but no one wanted to delve too deeply. After all, Maplewood liked to keep its secrets. Her husband, David Galloway, was the first to report her missing, his voice trembling with fear as he dialed the police. She left to get groceries and never came home, he stammered, panic thick in his voice. The townsfolk rallied around David, bringing casseroles and comfort, their own suspicions buried deep. David was one of them, a well-known volunteer and seemingly upstanding citizen, and it just didn't seem right to point fingers. Yet as days turned into weeks, and then months, the talk began. People questioned why David wasn't more proactive. Why had he barely left his house? Why hadn't he searched the woods himself, where Emily loved to hike? And why, if Emily had simply left for groceries, had her coat and purse been found right at home, hanging by the door? 3 months after Emily's disappearance, David received the first letter, a plain envelope, addressed with only his name, in neat handwriting. It was postmarked from a city nearly 200 miles away, a place David had no connection to. Inside was a single line, "I know what you did." David brushed it off as a cruel joke. Someone in town stirring the pot, exploiting his misery. But a week later, another letter arrived, this one from an entirely different city, and then another. Each letter carried the same chilling message, taunting him. David, growing anxious and feeling the walls of his empty home closing in, could no longer ignore it. That's when he sought out Beth Harmon. Beth Harmon had only lived in Maplewood for a few years. She was an ex-police officer turned private investigator who left the force after a scandal involving her partner, though she didn't talk much about her past. Her sharp mind and cool demeanor made her popular among those who had reason to be suspicious in Maplewood. David, desperate and sleepless, showed up at her door late one night. The shadows under his eyes told Beth everything she needed to know about his state of mind. "I need you to help me find out who's doing this," he said, sliding a stack of letters across her desk. "They think I killed her." Beth read through the letters carefully, her face unreadable. "Do you know why anyone would send these?" she asked. David shook his head vehemently. "No, Emily and we had our problems, but we loved each other. I didn't do anything to her." Beth nodded, though she knew that every man said that, innocent or guilty. Beth began by interviewing Emily's friends and co-workers, piecing together details of her life. She learned that Emily had been seen crying several times in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, but no one knew why. A close friend admitted that Emily had confided in her, saying, "David isn't who he seems to be," though she never elaborated. David's behavior was suspicious, but Beth wanted hard evidence, so she focused on the Galloway home. She spent a rainy afternoon combing through Emily's things, looking for clues. In the attic, she stumbled upon muddy footprints that appeared oddly fresh. It was as if someone had recently been up there in boots. On closer inspection, she found something more chilling, a tiny heart-shaped locket, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside the locket was a picture of Emily, but on the back was an inscription, "To my beloved," but there was no signature, no date. It seemed that David wasn't the only one who knew the attic well. Days later, while digging deeper into David's life, Beth found a connection to 2 other women who had vanished under eerily similar circumstances in nearby towns. Both cases were unsolved, but in both instances, David had been briefly acquainted with the victims. Realizing the gravity of her findings, Beth decided to confront David. But before she could, she received a text, a photo of herself, taken from across the street. She looked around her office, her skin prickling with unease. The caption read, "Be careful who you trust." Despite the warning, Beth went to confront David. She found him in his study, pacing. She showed him the locket, hoping it would rattle him, but instead, David looked perplexed. "That's not Emily's," he said. His voice barely a whisper. Beth pressed him further, showing him photos of the other missing women. She watched his reaction, but David's expression was unreadable. He finally broke down, confessing that he hadn't told her everything. "Emily and we fought. She found out about the affairs," he admitted. "But I swear I didn't hurt her. I loved her." But Beth couldn't be sure of his innocence. As she turned to leave, she heard a creak on the stairwell. Then everything went black. Beth woke up hours later in the attic, tied to a chair. Her head throbbed, and her vision was blurry. David was nowhere to be seen, but the key she'd found earlier lay on the floor in front of her. Struggling to free herself, she managed to reach it and unlock her bonds. Determined to finish what she started, she opened the old trunk the key belonged to. Inside were items from the other missing women, a scarf, a notebook, and several photos. In the corner, she found a letter addressed to her. The letter revealed that Emily had orchestrated her own disappearance, not just to escape David, but to expose him. Emily had been documenting David's affairs, convinced that he was somehow connected to the disappearances of other women. The letters he'd been receiving weren't from someone else, they were from her. In the letter, Emily explained her plan to flee and her intention to make David squirm under the weight of his own secrets. But she hadn't anticipated him bringing in Beth, or for things to escalate as they had. Just as Beth finished reading, she heard footsteps outside. The attic door opened, and there stood Emily, alive but unrecognizable, with her hair cropped short and her eyes steely. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Emily whispered. "But now you know the truth." In a final confrontation, Beth persuaded Emily to go to the authorities. David's dark past would come to light, and justice would finally be served. Not just for Emily, but for the other women who'd suffered in silence. In the end, Beth returned to her life, forever changed by the case. The final letter she received from Emily was brief, but powerful. "Thank you for helping me find my way back." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's mix of nail tutorials and storytelling, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Whether you're here for budget beauty tips or just to relax with some true crime, romance, or drama, there's always something new coming your way. Drop a comment below and let me know what you'd like to see next. Until then, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one. Goddess babes!